Grumble, grumble. Hey everyone, it's the Grumpy Meeple, and I am coming back at you with a new video that's also kind of an old video. I wanted to show off what I've been doing in terms of painting, and I use air quotes very deliberately there, my Marvel United X-Men figures, because I'm pretty happy with the way they're turning out. And so I wanted to kind of share the technique that I'm using, which is very simple and very, very fast. And some of you, if you happen to be one of the 50 people who watched my Zombicide second edition painting guide many moons ago, will recognize this because it's the exact same thing. I did the same thing with Chronicles of Drunagor as well. I have this method where I basically just prime these, slap some dark tone army painter on them, and seal them, and then dry brush them a little bit. And it really brings out the details without taking, hours to paint each individual figure. And so I wanted to show it off and show you exactly the materials that I use so that you could take a crack at reproducing this if for some reason you wanted to. So here's a sample of what I'm talking about. This is Magneto, the mutant master of magnetism. And I think you can see, so this was originally just a purple piece of plastic. And out of the box, the detail is there, obviously, because it's etched into the miniature. But I at least have difficulty seeing it, or seeing it as clearly as I might like to, straight out of the box. And so while I don't want to spend the rest of my life painting these miniatures, I do want them to look kind of cool. And so I came up with this as a kind of half measure to get me something better than raw plastic, less than, fully pro painted. And so this is how Magneto turned out. And I don't know, maybe you can kind of make your own judgment, but the little details on him really pop out. The little metal rivets on his cloak. He's got the crest of his helm, the kind of lines in his armor. The bases are really cool. They come with sculpted bases. He's got this really cool base where he's ripping, girders out of the ground, basically. And I think that this looks great, especially compared to just the painted, the plastic. And, I've got the rest of the figures here. Here we've got the Juggernaut. Really cool, kind of getting the eye sockets of his helm to pop out a little bit more. The muscle definition is insane. He's got this incredible base where he's just exploding off of it. And, with this technique that I'm going to show you, you can paint a miniature like this. Yeah, you have to wait for primer to dry and such, but you could get it painted probably in less than 10 minutes of actual work, like painting time. Here's Cyclops. This is an incredible miniature. I just look at all of it. What does he keep in those pouches? What's he got, extra visors in there? I don't even know. I literally have been reading X-Men comics for 30 years. I've never once seen him reach into one of those pouches. Maybe there's something in there. I don't know. Maybe he keeps just 8 pairs of ruby quartz sunglass backups. Standing on this cool kind of ruined base. Here's Saber Tooth. This is these miniatures are freaking incredible. I love them. I give Simon a lot of shit on this channel. Anybody who has paid even a tiny bit of attention will know that. But I've always said I give shit where shit is due and credit where it is due. And these miniatures are fucking on point. These are the coolest chibi miniatures I've ever seen. I love the detail in these. He's got his sweet ass kind of mop of hair and his feral teeth. And you can see I painted the bases to differentiate them since they're all painted the same. So the heroes are blue, the anti-heroes or whatever are purple, and the bad guys, the straight up villains, are red. Here we've got Jean Grey, looking fantastic. Love the details on her suit, love her little, you can see that she's, if you look under her chin, she's wearing her little weird, like, coif, or I don't even know what to call it. It's like a partial mask. It's like a thing that I like a holy woman would wear. I don't know what to call it. Here's Storm. Some of these I had a little bit more trouble with than others because I didn't do the greatest job of priming them, so I had to go back. It is, I have learned now, really easy to touch this system up too, which was a concern of mine. Especially once you work in the dry brushing step, basically. The dry brush will cover any errors you might have made. So you can see she's looking great, right down to the earrings, her cloak flowing behind her. See, like this back side of this, it's still a little darker than the rest, but I had screwed this up pretty bad, and I just dry brushed the shit out of it, and it ends up looking pretty goddamn dope. Here's the Beast. Looking fantastic. Love his claws and his belt. He's ready to pounce. He's got his fur sticking up all over the place and his hair slicked back. He's looking very feral. Here's Charles Xavier. Another kind of gotcha for this method is flat surfaces. They can be tough. You have to be careful because on a miniature like this, like Beast, that is so textured, this shit is so easy. You just get a brush and you just crap it on there and make sure it doesn't excessively pool, particularly on any like raised surfaces. But with a guy like this, it's almost never going to. It'll pool on a flat surface like this though, obviously. And so you do have to be more careful. And I screwed this up and I had to go back and dry brush over it extensively, but it looks fucking fantastic now. And I'm really excited. The other cool thing about this method is it's really easy to undo. I had actually done Xavier and I screwed him up so bad that I stripped him and redid it. And this stuff will, this Army Painter dark tone and even the primer, it'll just come right off. You throw these guys in a vat of something like LA's Totally Awesome or Simple Green and just brush them off and no problem. Here's Mystique. I think she's looking really cool. She's got her little skull crown, her skull's on her belt. Really cool dynamic pose. I don't know what exactly she's doing, but I like it. And then we've got the man, the myth, the Beast, Wolverine. And this one just turned out beautifully. I love all the little details on him. So how do I do this? Super simple. I'm going to show you the exact things that I use. You can get other things. Gray primer is gray primer, you might think, and you might be right. I just like, in particular, the exact way that these turn out. So I use the same method every time, and I'm going to show that to you. You can use whatever you want. Some of this stuff is a little expensive, such as the Gray Seer Contrast spray. This is like, here you go, $18. This was at Hobby Lobby in the United States, or Hobby Town, I should say. And this is not the cheapest primer in the world. It's not even close to the 100th cheapest primer in the world. But what it is super thin, I find. I almost never have problems with like over priming with this. And the stuff just dries in like minutes. And I really like the tone of it. It sets a really beautiful base tone that's not dissimilar to how, these end up looking. And so this is the only primer that I use basically, and I swear by it. It is expensive, and I know there are people out there who are going to say that's fucking ridiculous. You can go to Walmart and get a $3 thing of primer, and you're absolutely right. But that's what I use. So you prime them up. To prime them, go Home Depot, get yourself a little paint stick, get some double-sided tape, stick these mofos on there. That lets you turn them so that you can get to the undersides. Miniatures like this, dynamic miniatures like this, they have a lot of like recesses. You got to get in there, and spray them. Then I went over them with a pretty heavy coat of Quick Shade Dark Tone from Army Painter. You just slap this stuff on. I use a pretty big brush. This is an 8. This is a piece of crap, 50-cent brush from Walmart. You don't need anything special. I like a nice broad bristle so that I can just really, let me see if I can get this. Just because you got it. The trick with this Army Painter Dark Tone is it dries fast. And when it starts drying, it gets gloopy and you can't screw with it anymore. So the idea is you've got to get a layer of this stuff on as quickly as possible, basically. So you get a big brush full, and you just blast it all over, move it around. Don't let it sit and pool. You want it relatively, thin, because what it's going to do is it's going to darken all of those recesses. So you don't need a fancy brush, crappy, worthless brush. Make sure it is a worthless brush too, because this Army Painter Dark Tone will destroy your brushes. If you don't want it to, then you have to get yourself some mineral spirits. And let me grab this too, because I know this out. There we go. Get yourself some odorless mineral spirits, and that's how you clean these brushes. Get that dark tone off of them. Soap and water will not do it. It'll just gloop up, and it'll make a big mess. I use gloves when I use this painting method because this stuff is, nasty to have all over your fingers. But, man, it does a great job of getting into those recesses. And just like any other wash, and I'm sure you could do this with just as easily with Nuln Oil or some of the contrast paints. I know you can do it with some of the contrast paints because I've done it. Particularly the gray, whatever it's called, I can't remember, the stone gray, basically. The thing that I find with the wash in particular, like a Nuln Oil, is that it just, because it's thinner, it's a little harder to manipulate, and it tends to pool a little bit more where you don't want it to pool. So you get that stuff all over those. Once it's dry, or really before it's dry, go back over it. This is Army Painter Stone Golem. I find this to be like a really nice, it's not a match for this gray sear. It's just like barely a step up, and it just lightens up the mini a bit. It's really useful if you screw up. Like I said, like if you were to you weren't paying attention and you let this shit pool on Juggernaut's big flat head here, it'll look like shit because it'll be way darker than the rest of the miniature. You get yourself some of this Stone Golem, just get a small dry brush and just gently kind of, brush over it, and it'll knock that darkness down, and it'll be back to looking like normal. And then you seal it. I love this Vallejo acrylic matte varnish. I got this also at Hobbytown. You can get it on eBay too. It's not the easiest thing in the world to get. I used to only use, I can't remember the brand, Testers matte varnish. That stuff got really hard to find during the pandemic, and this is like the exact same thing basically, except in a much bigger can and much kind of cheaper, I think, by ounce or whatever. So I use this now to prime my miniatures, and I never really had a problem. the only thing you do want to pay attention to is you can't get too close with this stuff. You want to be back and you want to really kind of lightly apply it, because what'll happen is if you get up super close, then this itself will start to pool and it'll create like this clear, like glaze effect that is not desired, basically, because it won't be uniform across your miniature and it's a little cloudy. It clouds up detail a little bit. So just make sure you stay a good distance back and just brush it over it. Don't lay on it because it'll start to bubble out of this, and if you're over it like this, the bubbles will fall onto the miniature and then you'll get that glazing effect. And then you just do the bases, you know. Like I said, for this set, I grabbed a purple, a blue, and a red just out of what I had. This is, what is this? Xeris purple. I don't know, it doesn't need to be anything specific. And that's it. And so using that method, you can go from, you know, basically a blue piece of undefined plastic to what I think is some pretty seriously impressive detail popping right out of these guys, and a little bit of a comic booky, like a black and white look, you know, in really just a couple of minutes. If you do them in a batch, you could do them all in probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's easy to reverse too, you know. Like I said, you can strip this stuff back off. So that's pretty much all I had. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know in the comments what you think about this painting method. It's just so useful for something like this where there are hundreds of these miniatures. If you've got a family or a full-time job, you ain't painting these miniatures to detail every single one. I mean, and I don't like to play with miniatures that are mixed. I don't like to play. That's why I did all of these before I filmed another video. You'll notice if you're watching my playthrough series, I go from having nothing painted to having everything painted, because I don't like to mix. It just looks cheap and cheesy to me. So I did the whole core box, and every box I open from now on, I will do this painting method on and keep the kind of flow going. So hope you enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will talk to you later.